Shock Piece: The Search for Freedom. A novel by C. Nguyen. Chapter 44: The Remnants. September 2011. More than 1 month passed. The weather had changed suddenly in the last few days. It had turned back to bleak, rainy, cold, wintry days since yesterday. When Trin awoke, that lingering bleakness added to her not-so-bright mood, and she started the morning with a heavy and melancholy state of mind. Her sadness was only intensified today. Perhaps the weather had given the signal for her feelings to come forward, or perhaps the suppressed emotions needed to escape sometimes, regardless of rain or shine. After a cup of coffee, she felt brighter. The sun was high and brilliant. The air, however, was still very cold and crisp for a spring day in Sydney. Oddly, the sun seemed to play an important factor in regulating her mood. She often joked with her customers, "If you have to go on with a divorce and it's winter, just hang on in there. Give your partner a truce and tell him to wait until summer or a warmer season, then resume the course of action. You see, when the glorious sun is up, it keeps you company in the lonely days after the divorce. It's much easier keeping depression at bay." The women pondered this action plan and laughed together. However, research on seasonal effects on suicide rates suggests a lower rate in winter than in summer or spring, as opposed to popular belief, Trin added. See, Trin was only using the weather as an excuse for being dismal. Today was Father's Day. Her children had been with their father since yesterday. The unit was quiet. Even Cadbury was not making any noise outside. The unit was usually quiet these days. When was the last time she had a house full of voices? Trin had to downsize from a 5-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom unit recently. So many things had changed with time, and she often wondered when the happiest time in her life was. There must have been some happy times, Trin said aloud to the empty unit. On the other hand, perhaps happy times were only transits in her journey through life. They were scattered here and there, marking the trail at some significant points as memorable stops or rare scenic lookouts. Perhaps she was in a hurry and only focused on getting to her final destination without realizing that the final destination was actually the end, or frighteningly, death itself. Then she would miss her chance of finding those memorable scenic lookouts if she was not enjoying these stopovers along the way. Then they were scarcely happy times to remember before reaching the predictable end. Her journey had been eventful, with many dramatic moments up till now. Trin promised herself to be more attentive to those transient moments, as time was so valuable the more it passed her by. Her childhood's memory was scarred with the war, the escape, the refugee camp and migration, study. And then busily came the marriage, kids and work, the whole business, everything. The usual priorities, Trin muttered again, wondering if she would like to change her order of priorities or if she were happy to leave them so. Now, sometimes looking at her teenage sons and young people their ages and seeing their carefree attitude in life, Trin often wondered what it actually felt like. She longed to have that similar feeling, as she had never a real chance when she was at that age. Her teens had gone missing in her life, or so it seemed. She had started her book after the shock of discovering her eyesight was deteriorating faster than normal. The more words she put on these pages, the more she was afraid that time was running out. Day in and day out, so much was happening, and her book was still in its first few chapters. With suffering, death, and sorrow plaguing her family lately, she found tears were easily shed with little warning. Occasions like Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, dirt, and New Year's Day were the hardest. "You disappeared for 22 years, Trin," a friend had declared. He used to be a kid among the 100 kid neighbors at the refugee camp back in 1978 with her. and he had graduated as a general practitioner shortly after her graduation as a pharmacist at Sydney University. "I've been hibernating," Trin laughed with her answer. Her journey of life was divided into many parts. The turmoils of the first quarter ceased for a while, then re-entered in the third quarter, leaving the second quarter with some sort of normality, such as marriage, pregnancy, and children. That second quarter had ended by a divorce, letting her reclaim her old self again after a usual period of mourning for a broken family. "We are facing a difficult time as a broken family, and you all have to help me as much as I will continue to look after you," Trin remembered telling the children during her time of heartache. "Then who will look after you, Mum?" her eldest son, Sean, asked. Tears had flown down her cheeks with that innocent and caring statement. How she wished they never had to suffer any damage from a broken family. "You guys will look after me, of course," Trin managed at last. That had been more than 10 years ago. Her family had since recovered and made amends. Then recently, Trin had a look at a photograph taken a few months ago with her siblings and her mother and given it a name, "The Remnant of My Family," and realized that with a big family like hers, what remained was still substantial, even though the number had dwindled down a fair bit. She had begun her regular morning walk with that echo of the name, and then tears started to well up in her eyes without any warning. They continued to fall down her cheeks as innocently as they appeared, and no apology was needed. Leaving them free rein for a little while, Jin then tilted her head to look up at the clear blue sky as if using gravity to oppose their flow. To her astonishment, the bursting green shoots of trees, bushes, and flowers, and the enchanting chirping sound from unseen bellbirds began to engage her, nudging at her awareness. From that moment, Trin realized her sadness had no foundation. Life is full of beauty and wonder, with togetherness and living things, but also with separation and death. It was this fact that she must accept and become acquainted with. Another time, she had found in a very old box an audio cassette tape. The date on it was September 5th, 1981. Amazing how 30 years had gone from her life like a flash. The tape was about a Father's Day gathering with her family, consisting of father, mother, Mac, Yang, Kim, Luke, Kate, and her. The voices that belonged to those unseen faces appeared to be very young, innocent, lively, and full of spirit. Her father had passed away around this springtime. His was her first experience of death in Australia 19 years ago. And then only last month, Mac had gone, the second. Those two close ones were only voices now, like memories echoing from the unforeseen world of an audio cassette tape. Mother loved Mac dearly for everything he had done, and his failing health and his death from liver cancer had devastated her. Mother loved Mac dearly for everything he had done, and his failing health and his death from liver cancer had devastated her. Seeing both of her daughters, Yang and Trin, changing their status to become a widow and a divorcee in just a few years had drained her emotions. Yesterday morning, Mother had blurted out the minute she had sat down at the table, "I swear, in my next life I'll never bear daughters whose zodiac sign is tiger." Then, as an afterthought, she sighed and added, "That next life's still not here yet, somehow. It's not as easy as I'd thought." "Is that so, Mother?" Trin looked up from her morning cup of coffee and gave her mother a chuckle to disguise an aching heart. She understood from deep down in her being that her mother was feeling for both of them, her sister and her, bearers of the sign of the tiger. Do you know that in our traditional Asian horoscope, the tiger is a strong and independent personification of the 12 zodiac signs? Fiery, powerful, and successful with an eventful life, but usually lonely at heart? Not in terms of material means. On the contrary, it usually brings wealth or an affluent lifestyle to that person. But in terms of loving relationships between a husband and wife, it is a sure sign of separation, of a broken marriage or premature death. A guarantee of tears and grief. In short, the bearer has a glamorous and dramatic life, whether she likes it or not. Mother started her narrative apologetically. Years ago, in ancient times, before a marriage proposal was put forward between the two families, the groom-to-be's side had to be certain that the expectant bride was not a tiger. They might very well cancel the whole thing without a second thought if she was. These days, such dramatic scenarios rarely happen, but this belief is still very common. Somehow, most things that happen to female tigers often have dark forebodings. Either it is the result of remarkable coincidence or ominous conjecture plays an important role. In any case, it is still a mystery. You and Yang are both my tiger daughters, Ji softly concluded her narrative. Yet her mother had declared she already decided in her next life she would not produce daughters whose sign was the tiger. She could not endure seeing her children suffering turmoil after turmoil in her lifetime. Trin felt so sad hearing her declaration. She had wished to be able to spare her this everlasting grief, most of all from her side, or at best when she was still in this life. It was a wish that was beyond her ability to fulfill, but of course a wish nevertheless. Her mother was a very energetic, unselfish, and caring person. Trin was so proud of her. Without her, the family would not have had a chance to be here. She had masterminded the escape with Mac, and they had landed safely in the beautiful and free country of Australia. Trin continually marveled at her keenness in bustling around the kitchen, cooking dish after dish for them, busy doing something most of the time. She rarely stayed idle and constantly looked for things to do, folding clothes neatly in piles, even though moments later it was being disheveled by one child or another once the piles left her care. Her cataracts had been operated on 2 years ago, and now her eyesight was 10 times better than Trin's. "Could you thread the needle for me, mother?" Trin gave her a tiny needle. She had to ask her mother to thread it for her whenever she had to mend something for herself or for her sons. Then her mother would gladly take the task out of her hands and finish it herself, seeing how clumsy Trin was. "Of course, I can see minute things now," mother would proudly say. "Even the tiniest specks of dust." Then she would use her bare hands to wipe the table's surface as proof of her excellent eyesight. These last few days, mother was noticeably less mobile and rarely left her room. "Are your knees playing up again, mother?" Trin asked. "Yeah, this time it was the left one, not the right one like last year." Watching her mother walking tentatively, one step after another in slow motion, around the house had filled her heart with anguish. Trin had felt her pain as much as her mother felt it for herself. Ji's physical well-being had been defeated by her years. It showed the signs of heartache and sorrow, following another death in the family. She had outlived them miraculously, and had endured great pain in losing both. Ji had aged noticeably. Twice within a year, she had suffered the agony of burying her son, Dien, and her son-in-law, Mac, from the cruel disease of liver cancer, an ominous cancer from hepatitis B plaguing the majority of her people and leading to a high number of deaths. The awareness campaign is being raised in an effort to halt the curse in the community. Within a few years, Trin had become experienced, skillful, and adept in dealing with the dilemma of a couple's separation, someone for her sister to lean on. Even though their circumstances were entirely different, the result was still the same. Yang was now alone and grieving. Her lifelong companion had departed from this world, leaving her with emptiness, a giant void that seemed impossible to fill. She was suffering from a brutal loss that was inescapable by the karma of fate, and Trin had suffered from loss through choice. It was not entirely her choice at that time, but as her life had progressed further along, it became an obvious release for her well-being. Trin had been very much in shock then, like her sister now, but as time moved on, Trin had moved on successfully with it. Trin had given Yang her excellent practical tips for easing the pain of a lonely woman, the last thing they had expected. They had been so confident and ever so efficient with their future planning, true to the characteristics of the tiger, with everything ending neatly from every aspect. So when things went wrong, the shock was very real. Listen to Buddha's teaching. Live your life at its own pace. Don't rush forward even in sorrow and sadness, Yang, Trin had said, trying to convince her sister. I know that it seems impossible at the time, and sometimes the need to cry was so overwhelming that I found it hard to resist the temptation too. Like you, I'm wondering if crying is the best therapy for the soul to seek solace for the pain it is enduring. Or perhaps we are wrong in assuming that the best way to deal with pain and sorrow. Should we ignore them totally? Should we pretend that they do not exist and go on empty-minded with a carefree attitude as we always appear to the outside world? Or should we look at them as objectively as we can and wait for our body and mind to heal with time? Which way would be best? To cry our heart out and empty its sorrow, lightening the burden that life normally inflicts upon every soul? On the other hand, would it be better to gather all pain and sadness, put them in a sealed box, and place it carefully in a locked cupboard into which we might look now and then just to check whether the box was still there? With luck, one day we'll open it to see all the pain and sorrow has vanished or decayed with time. Yang was quiet, leaving Trin with all the talking about a box that contains sorrow and sadness. I've got one given to me from a newly acquired friend, and I named that box as such. In that box, beautifully decorated and softly covered by feminine pink satin, were 3 crystal angels whose purpose was perhaps to help me push away any undue weariness in life and to continue my journey peacefully and determinedly along the way. I jokingly told my youngest son, Eddie, that the box contained my dilemmas and each angel represented one of them, meaning that I have 3 worrisome unfinished to-dos to tackle, considering I am already 3/4 done as one is more or less out of the way. Trin smiled. See, everyone has his or her own dilemma to deal with at any period of time. Love, hatred, loneliness, jealousy, teens, health, career, etc. It's how you deal with it. Time is magic, believe me. I've been there, and nothing beats with the clock. It's moving and washing everything away slowly and effectively, believe me. Trin smiled, then continued. Don't rush forward. Tackle one thing at a time. Then after a while, everything will be solved, and your sorrow and burden will eventually be less and less. Believe me, Yang. Trin smiled again and hoped what she said was true. Yang was 12 years older than her, a full circle of the 12 zodiac animal signs, and while fate had dealt them a similar situation and their hair had lost its youthful shine, their age gap appeared less. Strange as it is, I'm happier now. If living independently, peacefully, and coming back to being my own true self is the meaning of happiness, then it's a happier outcome, despite occasional loneliness now and then. But it's rewarding. Trin had reassured Yang and laughed, lifting the somber feeling. Nevertheless, Yang had had the same forlorn listlessness that a separated person experiences from the loss of years and years of companionship and habitual presence, as Trin had in the past. Her grief was insurmountable, as their marriage had been a close one from the start, a 37-year bond that was now fast becoming unusual in this hectic modern life. These last few weeks had drawn them closer than before, Drin often wondered what life had bestowed upon them. 4 out of 5 women in the family. Her mother, Yang, V, and she were now single women. I was a widow when I was 60, and now it's the same with Yang, her mother said. There was an absence of men in her mother's life. Your father was also a tiger and rarely stayed at home. He usually wandered around the country either through the demands of his occupation or later because of his adventurous nature after retirement. He led a glamorous life when he was young, very much true to the prediction, Mother would repeat her story to Trin. Your older brother, Nguyen, came back after the war, but determined to stay back in Vietnam when all the family escaped, and now he has gone. Nguyen had come with them but decided to migrate a second time to the United States only 2 years after arriving in Australia. He had followed his heart to marry his high school sweetheart when he was in his 20s. Her father, with his habitual urge to travel, had not stayed long at home just as before, even though the distance from his homeland was 8,000 kilometers away. The latter part of his life ended in loneliness, with years in a nursing home after a series of strokes. Her little brother Luke had remained her mother's closest son ever since. Her colleague had remarked, "Somehow, strangely, there are only women left in this world. It's a puzzle where all the men have gone." Another added, "Either they're gay or they're all married. Pity." "Ah, it's true, isn't it?" Drin agreed. She was surrounded with women who had lost their men along their journey or had not been able to find one. Wait a minute. There are married women whose loneliness is comparable to being single, as their men often seem lost in their own alien world, leaving wives emotionally abandoned and confused, another would say. You see, maybe I should try now to solve the puzzle of where all the men have gone, and save the world population from an increasing number of single women. They all bear the tiger's ominous foreboding of marital separation in death and in loneliness after all. On the other hand, independent, self-sufficient women have perhaps frightened all the men into hiding as a result. Men are afraid of feeling redundant, I'm sure, Drin added. Just stay helpless and dependent or even ignorant and stupid, then they will come back and be your heroes, dear. Drin laughed at her own joke. And as for being a tiger, the coincidence seems quite extraordinary that all 3 women in my family have all suffered greatly from the cruelty of life. My half-sister, Betty, the eldest, had an aneurysm and passed away unexpectedly, just a year short of turning 40. I still clearly remember her exaggerated fear of getting close to the historical mark of the big 4-0, and as destiny had kindly and unkindly granted her wish, she never reached the 4-decade milestone. Drin continued, 34 years ago, 40 was considered very ancient. She was also born in the year of the tiger, 2 full zodiac cycles ahead. Beautiful, elegant, feminine, and sophisticated, she was very much my idolized sister. Her life was also a dramatic one with tears and laughter mingled together. She was an optimistic person, come whatever situation, however tragic. Betrayal, romance, and separation concluded with her premature death after her short but eventful life. Would there be a sound explanation apart from the astrological aspect of her zodiac sign? I truly wonder. Drin confided to her friends. Whatever the explanation, her wish was still the same, that of sparing her mother from further anguish. Her mother's box of sorrow and sadness must be empty, and she must remain happy, purposeful, lively, and strong in all her remaining years. Drin loved her dearly, and the events of late made her realize sometimes a little too late to express her love, which appeared to have lost its personal touch.